Not everybody wants to be a Hulkamaniac, and some can't stand the man himself. These contemporaries of the Hulkster didn't like his ego, his steroid use, or his backstage politics. Bob Backlund and Hulk Hogan have virtually nothing in common, physically or philosophically. The only tie that binds the two together is the WWE Championship, a title Backlund held twice compared to Hogan 6 times. The two frequently butted heads in the ring and have exchanged words in the media long past their in-ring primes. Hogan alleged on The Steve Austin Show that Backlund seemingly attempted to change the booking of Hogan's first title win over the Iron Sheik in January 1984. Hogan claimed that Backlund told Vince McMahon the company's world title should be reserved for a real athlete, implying that Hogan fell short of that standard. For his part, Backlund told Ring Rust Radio in 2016 he was not a fan of the way Hogan carried himself outside the ring. He said, "Hogan was a great person in the ring, but we didn't like his outside activities. We thought he wasn't a very good representation of the business or a model for young people to look up to. He didn't walk the walk." In an interview with Inquisitor, Backlund denigrated Hogan for his use of steroids. Backlund's impressions of Hogan are not likely to have changed in light of his recent controversies. He spoke with Devin Hannibal Nicholson in February 2022 and had very little positive to say about the Hulkster. Bret Hart's grievances with the Hulkster also were born out of professional conflict. Hart lost to Yokozuna at WrestleMania 9 only for Hogan to walk down the aisle and pick up the scraps, winning the title in an impromptu 22-second match. Hart said he agreed to the booking with the promise that Hogan would eventually give him a title win, but the Hulkster shot down the idea either directly or indirectly. During an episode of The Wrestling Shoot interview, Hogan acknowledged he may have disparaged Hart, framing him as just a tag team wrestler. The Hitman naturally took it personally. Since then, Hart has gone out of his way to bury Hogan. He has called him a 1 out of 3 wrestler and told the Calgary Sun that Hogan didn't know a headlock from a headlamp. Hogan also detailed an encounter he had with Hart at the WWE Hall of Fame induction ceremony in 2005. When Hogan offered to shake Hart's hand, Hart declined and was whisked away by Steve Austin before he could say anything else. Hart went on Periscope a few years ago to make clear there was no love lost between him and Hogan.
I'm not a big Hulk Hogan fan.
Bruno Sammartino did not approve of Hogan's behavior when the cameras were off. But unlike Bob Backlund, the two champions could relate a little better. The Italian immigrant carried the WWE on his back for more than 11 years and is the product of the McMahon family's championship-centric approach. But Bruno could never get over how little Hogan seemed to offer from an in-ring standpoint. Sammartino detailed his stance during an appearance on Legends with JBL. He said, "I was never a fan of Hogan because I was never impressed with his quality of performance in the ring. A lot of people thought he was a great draw, but in reality, he really wasn't." Sammartino also told RF Video that Hogan no-showed matches against him in the mid-late 80s and had to be replaced by Sergeant Slaughter. Sammartino passed away in 2018 with his Hogan sentiments intact, but the feeling doesn't seem to be mutual. Hogan praised Bruno shortly after his passing. Arguably Hogan's biggest rival inside the squared circle, the Iron Sheik also does not seem to be a fan of the Hulkster in real life. The Sheik curses Hogan on Twitter at least once a day. Their real-life feud goes back a long way. Hogan alleged on The Steve Austin Show that AWA promoter Verne Gagne attempted to put a bounty on the Hulkster's head for leaving the promotion. Hogan says the Sheik told him after a match that Gagne requested he break Hogan's leg in retaliation for leaving. Gagne's son, Greg, denied the story in an interview with Sportskeeda, claiming the Sheik made it up. Given their in-ring rivalry, one might think the Sheik is simply trying to continue the on-screen story, but there seems to be at least some legitimacy to his beef with Hogan. He said of Hogan in an interview with Boston Wrestling, "Linda, his wife, she's a good person. She left you, and you are some piece of garbage." The Sheik also told Howard Stern that Hogan wouldn't return his calls in the years following their 1984 Madison Square Garden match, and also promised him a spot on a reality show with no follow-up.
That's the 2 times, Mr. Howard, he lied to me.
Of course, in wrestling, anything could be a work. Maybe the longtime rivals are really pals. They did dress up as one another for Halloween in 2015. Scott Steiner did not have positive feedback for the Hogan-Bischoff regime in TNA, and he once tried to talk owner Dixie Carter out of bringing the duo on to run the company. TNA co-founder Jeff Jarrett said on an episode of his podcast, My World, "It got uncomfortable, and Scott didn't want to be uncomfortable. He looked Dixie in the eye and said, Hulk Hogan will run you out of business. He will put you out of business." Steiner's animosity toward Hogan came to a head during WrestleMania weekend in 2015. Steiner had a run-in with Hogan's wife, Jennifer, at the San Jose airport earlier in the week. TMZ reports that he told Jennifer he planned to kill Terry, referring to Hogan's real name, Terry Bollea, as soon as he landed, prompting Hogan to file a police report. While surveillance footage from the day does show Steiner confronting Jennifer, Big Papa Pump denied making a death threat. Steiner claims he only told her that Randy Savage, who was inducted after his passing by Hogan at the Hall of Fame ceremony that year, would have never let Hogan induct him if he were alive. Steiner told TMZ, "I'm not going to dignify Hogan's lies. I didn't put my hands on her. If she felt her life was threatened, why didn't she talk to the cops?" Hogan did take the time to wish Steiner well during his recovery from a collapse at an Impact Wrestling taping in 2020. The Undertaker's account of his dealings with Hulk Hogan around the time of his debut paints the Hulkster's political ways in a negative light. The two worked together at Survivor Series 1991 in a match that ended with the dead man pinning Hogan after a tombstone piledriver on a steel chair. Following the match, Hogan complained he had sustained an injury as a result of the Undertaker's finishing maneuver and had to spend a night at the hospital. For years, fans had to live with a one-sided account of one of pro wrestling's many mysteries. The Undertaker, as always, stayed in character. That is, until he opened up to Peter Rosenberg in 2020 about his issues with Hogan. The Undertaker said Hogan told him upon impact he had been legitimately injured by the move. The Hulkster went on to play up the injury both in the ring and backstage, leaving The Undertaker mortified that he just injured the WWF's Golden Goose. However, Shane McMahon informed The Undertaker shortly after the match that Hogan's head had not hit the mat after all. This led to The Undertaker confronting a healthy Hogan about the injury the following week, with Hogan allegedly replying that the tightness of the grip jammed his neck. Hogan's weird response caused The Undertaker to question whether the Hulkster tried to sabotage him. While Hogan has refuted the claim, he can never seem to give a straight answer on how the situation played out from his end, stating in his memoir that his head had, in fact, made contact with the chair. The Undertaker told Rosenberg that the interaction with Hogan told him all he needed to know about the Hulkster.
My radar was always up anytime that I had to, interact with him, but I dealt with him. I dealt in a professional manner with him.
Shawn Michaels' problems with Hogan played out for wrestling fans around the world during the summer of 2005. Like others, Michaels grew annoyed by Hogan's political maneuvering. Michaels detailed his frustrations with Hogan on the DVD, The Shawn Michaels Story, Heartbreak and Triumph, claiming the original plan was to do a best-of-3 series with Hogan. This would give both sides a reasonable amount of shine, but Hogan backed out of the series days out from SummerSlam, forcing Michaels to lose to Hogan in a single match. Michaels also didn't like the idea of having to temporarily turn heel. He said, "In my mind, I presented it to Hulk as just good guy versus good guy. And the thing where HBK was just like, man, I gotta know if I can beat the immortal Hulk Hogan." The next week, I was told that Terry would prefer classic heel versus babyface. Like you're in 98. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. The resulting match saw Michaels obnoxiously oversell for Hogan, causing fans to question why things played out the way they did. Hogan thought nothing of it in the immediate aftermath and claimed in a 2015 interview it was Vince McMahon's decision for him to ultimately win the match. Michaels followed up the match with a sarcastic promo the following night on Raw. He buried Hogan before segueing into a new feud with Chris Masters. These days, Michaels' resentment of Hogan seems to have waned. He commented during a Q&A in the UK a few years ago he appreciated the honor of having worked with Hogan. He added, "The selling was something I did just for my own enjoyment. It wasn't right. It wasn't professional." Hogan and Sid Justice had an altercation in the 1992 Royal Rumble match to help build to their match later that spring at WrestleMania 8. Sid claimed to the Wrestling Inc. podcast that following the segment, Hogan threw a temper tantrum in the locker room to such an extent that Sid was ready to quit that same night.
Hogan came back in the locker room screaming and crying.
Sid would ultimately stick around through WrestleMania that year when a drug suspension caused him to leave the company and pursue a professional softball career. Sid has also admonished Hogan's behavior outside the ring. Sid told Title Match Wrestling he was not a fan of Hogan Knows Best, the Hulkster's VH1 reality show, commenting that it exposed him as an old man. He has also since commented on their WrestleMania 8 match, criticizing it due to Hogan's limited in-ring capabilities. He told the High Spots Network, "It was a horrible match with Hogan that night too. Hogan was a horrible worker, so that's what made that. There might not be a man alive more anti-Hulk Hogan than Jesse the Body Ventura. Ventura's beef with Hogan stems from a perception of inauthenticity. Feeling shortchanged as a performer, Ventura sought to unionize the WWE locker room in the 1980s, but faced seemingly unlikely opposition from Hogan. Ventura says that during discovery in a 1991 lawsuit against WWE, he learned Hogan had ratted out his unionization attempt to Vince McMahon. Ventura said he initially viewed this as a betrayal by a friend, but then he understood Hogan's motivations.
When we went to court, I saw in WrestleMania 3, Hogan got paid more than all of us combined.
From the 1991 trial onward, Ventura went cold turkey on Hulkamania. Former WCW president Eric Bischoff explained on his podcast 83 Weeks that Ventura did not care for Hogan on any kind of level. Ventura was a commentator for WCW when Hogan joined the company in 1994. It apparently soured the working relationship. Bischoff said, "I got along fine with Jesse until Hogan came in. And once we brought Hogan in and made that commitment, there was a negativity or resentment or something in Jesse that made him kind of a downer and kind of miserable to be around." Ventura has since taken every opportunity to needle Hogan in the media. He spoke to Ring Rust Radio about Hogan's recent controversies, speculating that people were beginning to see the real Hulk Hogan in light of his racist comments caught on film. When asked if he's talked with Hogan since the 1991 lawsuit, Ventura told Graham Bensinger,
I've never spoken to him since and don't intend to.